Okay, I think I'm going to go with this lighting right here. But anyway, I wanted to include real quick because I'd mentioned, the secrets of the temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and the information about the European-owned, the German-owned mining for raw diamonds. And I've referred to it, I think I did it on a video, but I know I did with like an audio recording for like my notes on my phone, is that the information, okay, identified in the book about De Beers diamonds, mining for raw diamonds, okay, it's really in South Africa, okay, but here's the thing about it, and I think I did it on a video, but anyway, I'm going to have to look and make sure, and I'm wanting to include it again real quick, because all the information that's identified about mining for raw diamonds in the book Secrets of the Temple, and I kind of inadvertently just automatically placed it as like a Harris, Egypt, equating factor in a triangle, the 6-point star, and the Delta Force, and Israel being 73. Okay, the thing about the information of the Beers diamonds in the book Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and them mining for raw diamonds, it's in South Africa. The thing of it is that all that information is really the Egypt area. Here's the thing, is that the alphabetics of the Harris, the Houston, Texas Electronic Power and Wind International Selective Service is like 181, yet Harris being, the Houston, Texas thing about Harris being 73, and Egypt and Israeli, or Union, presents all the alphanumerics in the Houston area. And the information about mining for raw diamonds is like almost like the Chevrolet Geo Prism and Hyundai Excel, one of the largest shipments in like world history and in American history, like one of the largest shipments in the port of Houston, okay? Yet it presents the colors of the rainbow and the prism and the diamond and the information as De Beers diamonds in the book Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country. And the thing about ultimately that the Chevrolet Geo Prism, it ultimately gets the thing about the global positioning systems, geographic information systems, and geographics and all that geo and geometric stuff that ultimately gets to like isometrics and giving the impression of like actual participation as compared to a 90-degree. But anyway, I want to include that because all the information that refers to South Africa is really ultimately in the Sahara Desert and the Persian Gulf area and the Egypt area, really seriously, because it's compatible, interchangeable with all the information in Houston, is really what the thing about, that is about that, as well as Houston and Harris being the south side like of the United States. Yet all the information about the European-owned, the German-owned mining for raw diamonds is like the difference between like the United States being region 1 and Europe being region 2. And all that information that seemed to be ultimately, 12 being the numerical value and the alphanumeric value of 12 being like 87 in truth, or a miracle God, or, the thing about the alphanumerics. And I think it is 204. I knew it Coptus with the symbolic representation equated to like 58. And I knew it being 79, C being 3, and the symbolic representation being 58, and the PTIS being 64. I think it's like 204. Anyway, the one word in the book of Thessalonians being transfiguration. The alphanumerics 192, all about re-entering heaven from, after the third day of the Lord Jesus Christ resurrecting and like going to Mount Olives, and then ascending from Mount Olives, okay, which is actually a plateau, and ascending and like re-entering, heaven. It's all about, that one word in Thessalonians, and the alphanumerics 192 that way. Ultimately, even the home theater presenting, if it's really the issue between if it's solid state, or a programmable automation as a preference, or, maybe solid state as maybe not integratable in the form of option involving automation, but a standard, and it's not an option as solid state. And if integration is not the fact about any automation and none whatsoever, then it's like not necessarily a featured option. It's a standardized absolute, and it's kind of like the way I see solid state. Identifying, something about like geographic attachment and color code. Ultimately, even Southwestern Bell, and automatically, Southwestern Bell being like as a point of origin of like a 247 degree, being of the Highway 59 Southwest Freeway, and ultimately, the deal about, in my mind, you know, the difference between like infinity and the 90-degree right angle, presenting, you know, the thing about pi r squared applied to, you know, the word and pronunciation of pi r squared, and squared being, you know, think about, you know, two 90-degree right angles presenting, you know, ultimately the infinite lines. And really, you know, in addition to, you know, using the radius to find the diameter of a circle, just using it in pronunciation applied to itself, not even its intended use, other than pronunciation and alphanumerics and linguistics, actually provides that, you know, second zero in the infinite lines is like infinity on a zoom lens in perfect 1010 vision, you know, even in the planetarium using the stars. Isometric in a way that even in biblical times, using stars, yet of, you know, like, of like travel and destination, you know, like using the sun and the stars and all that, you know, as far as like, navigating, you know, like, even in biblical times, it's like the isometric factor about, you know, like even 3D international. And that's something I want to include real quick, because the thing with it is that book, Secrets of the Temple, How the Third Observer Runs the Country, I mean, you know, I'd read it, and really, I mean, automatically, I was looking for, really, because of a baptism, once again, an experience after, like, not many days hence, and I wasn't counting, but I'm sure it's, like, within a 10 day and night thing, from, like, June 14th, 1992, Saturday morning, a Flag Day thing about it, okay? And hopefully, even, like, years later, I'm going to have to actually really have to think about the James Lanall unit. And the one Saturday morning seemed to be approximately about the same time, actually, of the baptism. And how many different years later that identical twin rainbow, I mean, it's like satellite technology, like in my mind of the movie Best Defense with Chevy Chase. And not necessarily the laser, although in the movie, you know, it presents the laser from, like, outer space, like a satellite orbiting the Earth with that kind of capability and technology of a laser, you know, directing from outer space to, like, a poolside conversation with patio furniture and shattering the glass, okay? And it seemed to be like almost a deal about Safari browser and certain factors of which seen on some of the mobile phones that I really don't necessarily agree to, but it seemed to be like also the laser being presented involving, like, you know, remote drone as like, you know, some type of, you know, KU band and VSAT communications. Representative, you know, Chase was known around the Houston area as satellite, you know, branches, and that's the thing of it is that was, you know, a known fact in this area that Chase was being referred to as a satellite branch. The thing about that one movie, Best Defense, it presents that satellite and that one laser, but, you know, on the commercial it's showing, you know, the deal about some type of browser or some other commercial, and the lasers are like zapping a bunch of black wings involving I actually have to think about it, but I'm not sure if it's like representing Safari, but I think the thing with this is that even, you know, David Phelps' song, Game Changer, and something about, even in my mind, the song Restless Heart, but, you know, it seemed to be, you know, the thing about, you know, like a game warden and the song by David Phelps, I mean, Game Changer, I mean, you know, my thing about, you know, David Phelps is like that Legacy of Love, live in concert, I mean, it's like phenomenal. I mean, awesome. I mean, he is so in control of his voice. It's unreal. Some of the best vocals, I mean, available, like, to this day. Like, I mean, tremendously awesome, for real. But anyway, like, he's got that, like, compact disc, and I kind of, like, have been working on it here recently whenever I feel like it. But there's, like, you know, like, a lot of hurry up and wait been going on for, like, you know, going on, like, 6 years now. Huh. Yeah, so, like, anyway, okay. But the thing is that me getting to my original music is, like, really, yeah, so, like, as soon as that's going to be, it's kind of like I'm trying to avoid, like, any other, like, you know, delays in, like, or any complications originating maybe from, like, a mood-altering religious experience somewhere, like, during some idea, like, separation between church and state, and, you know, United States Codes Annotated, presenting some, all all that, like, I don't know if I would call it verbatim, or repudiation in jurisprudence, or maybe of the separation church and states as, like, verbatim, as compared to, you know, maybe the thought of, like, maybe some degreed or non-degreed issue, like a mood-altering religious experience representing some idea, like jurisprudence of, you know, some color code, some I like the Sprite in you, and, like, the colors of British Petroleum, and the thing about the book and the law library, jurisprudence, and, like, the the word repudiation and warehousing and how that's like connected to real estate in the black books of like state statutes annotated and some like on Paul province and some color code in world history. And it seemed to be the thing about it. But anyway, yeah, so like I wanted to include something about that book because I wanted to mention it about the raw De Beers diamonds. Okay, here's the things that like there's like a back in the early 70s there was like Jack's I think it's like a Pearl Beer and like Jack's beer. But anyway, it seems and the De Beers diamonds kind of it almost presents the idea of like a mini pearl and hee haw. Yet I mean, to me, I mean that's so really not it. Yet a thing about a mini series on television seems to be a real not funny situation. And I wanted to mention the deal once again, including the name Paul Volcker in the book, the New York Federal Reserve Bank president in the book named Paul Volcker. Once again, I'm so not sure if that's really the actual information, the real name of the person. I mean, or if it's just the whole point of using the initials of Paul Volcker being PV as like a cabinet speaker, a PA speaker for like concert venues, or American Amplified that way, or what the congressional act involving a Senate and a cabinet speaker that way, or the House of Representatives. I mean, like this way, right? Like right now. Okay, the thing with this is that, in any case, it seemed to be like whether or not if the initials for like Paul Volcker being PV backwards is like the VP and Vice President and what Vice President network is. So I mean, like even OSHA and the seem to be like OSHA is so much about like construction with like high rise and huge commercial venues. Okay. It's Occupational Safety and Health Administration. You have the acronym of like OSHA being OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. It's almost like an operating system, but like HA being like the single difference of like Sahara and Sarah. Yet it presents the most beautiful woman identified as like in the King James Version Bible as like Sarah. At the same time, I mean, it seems to have the connectivity to the Statue of Liberty. And, like even Venus, based upon all the information. But in any case, okay, here's the things that information, it ultimately gets to, like, Paul Volcker during the Ronald Reagan presenting, the ray gun once again and the laser. And, it's kind of like, I'm kind of like, already like hooked on phonics about a coupon, okay? The thing with this is that, so, I mean, all this lighting, it seemed to be, ultimately it seemed to be, the thought of like even like a Lyndon B. Johnson thing involving and I'll have to actually will have to think about Theodore to like Franklin Roosevelt, who's really first or in chronological or Pentagon Reserve reverse in alphabetics of 92 or intelligent and opposite or telepathic face or the opposite of intelligence or Pentagon Reserve reverse. And, the difference between, a picture's a picture or, MP3 or MP4 format. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that probably would be more along the lines of, like, the idea of, like, live, recording. In any case, yeah, I got to make sure that I'm covering all this because the book, Secrets of the Temple, identifies Paul Volcker, okay? Yet, the initials being PV and VP, like a Vice President network. And automatically it seems to me, like OSHA involving construction in the biblical scripture. Jesus said he knew before the foundations of the earth. Earth being like 52 in heart and the thing about pearl and all the information of connectivity and even like pearl drum, okay? And, the pearl drum set that I have, okay? And I'm getting all the strata blue, but it's kind of like the availability is being, a network thing like already, okay? And how true Kobe ID 19 is reflecting some idea of like a method of banking as international banking systems or some idea of, what boycott and embargo means to, some idea of like, citizenship and birthrights or, the North American Free Trade Act or the who knows anyway, form like, I mean, of a carbon footprint and absentee voting. So like anyway, okay, the thing is that that one scripture, My mother used to stress that I mean so very much when I was like real young. Jesus said he knew for the foundation of the earth, and not really even thinking about like building, a residential or a home or even more so. I mean like a high rise, okay. And I was actually involved with like participating in for a while with like the construction of like a First City National Bank. And I say downtown, but I want to say uptown at the same time. But yeah, all because of that McDonald's Golden Arches, the grade level of reputable standards of considered participation. Some like idea of like the American Express Bluebird card with like the gold edge, presenting like somewhere in my mind automatically the Aerosmith song. Now anyway, about living on the edge. And all that innovation leading the way, and the cutting edge technology is seemingly to be like the golden arches, a golden equator, a 90 degree the golden equator. I mean, looking at the card, reading it from left to right would be like a landscape as compared to a portrait. With a 90 degree the golden equator, it seemed to be the deal about I mean that card, the American Express Bluebird with the gold edge, and the 15 digits. Even the thing about the prefix of the White House being 4, 5, and 6, and being like a 15, or face value of the big O thing about it. Yeah, so like I was thinking about that because I mean like Aerosmith has got that song "Living on the Edge," okay, and like I was like really noticing that anyway because of like Microsoft Edge, and when I got that like I've been having like some really not funny complications, just like getting my Bluebird, my American Express Bluebird card. And not being presented, all kinds of like, explanations, like, and it seemed to be like one particular person had mentioned something about it, even before I got it, okay, and now it seemed to be like when and where, she had mentioned that loud, it seemed to be like something like that about that, but anyway, like Aerosmith, seemed I was thinking about that part about the living on the edge and being involved like building, certain factors of a high rise, normally of like a chiller system and, industrial type of like commercial air conditioning systems and air controls and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, so like in pipe fitting and all this stuff anyway. And it seemed to be like after I'd heard that song by Aerosmith, "Living on Edge," that somehow in my mind it got to when concrete being poured on from floor to floor. And if my memory serves me correctly, that the First City National Bank in Houston is like 24 floors. I think. I'm pretty sure, yeah. But anyway, so like, when they're pouring that concrete on the outer edges, I mean, it's like real thicker in that particular area around the edge, probably for about maybe an 18-inch to maybe even 2 foot. It's like a lot thicker, yet they put like a huge vibrator in to the concrete while it's wet to vibrate all the like air bubbles out of it, so that when it dries, that will prevent any stress cracks or it like cracking and ultimately maybe breaking off or disintegrating. In any case, so like that's just something that they do. But anyway, then all the connectivity to the band's name itself, like Aerosmith, it got to like the thing about the Lockheed Martin and the arrow, like 2 open arrows with like 4 lines and like 3 intersecting points of axes, okay, and ultimately the wall, and it seemed to be the 5th dimension thing about the book Orion's Performance Monitoring of the different colors of hot air balloons, ultimately getting to the rainbows, and it seemed to be about the deal about Fort Stockton, Texas, and that one particular rainbow, and Chase actually being identified, in the Pearland, Texas area, in the Houston area, was like a known fact all around the entire Houston area that Chase Bank was being known for like a satellite branch. And before I like even had this connectivity or all these things are going on, originated, really from like June 14th, 1992. And then, some experience, that seemed to be like about a 16 to an 18-month period later. And then, like several phone calls, and then all of a sudden a 6-month period later. And after studying all this stuff years later, I'd realized that all that was like Alpha America, how it was happening. Especially something about, in December of like 1993, ultimately, some idea of like the managed center, like participating, going through a circuit, some like telepathic, figure it out for yourself, kind of like all the way through it, and learn as you go, kind of, I don't like calling it crap, but, that's, not funny as well, yeah, so like, so it seemed to be the Alpha America 6 that way, about a 6-month period after, like, some idea of the psychic warrior, America's foremost psychic spy, yeah. And the cover up, yeah, yes, the cover up and the top secret, yeah, yeah. Once again, yeah, like a bird bath baptism, yeah, and the cover up, yeah. I mean, it's on the front book of the book cover. I mean, automatically. I mean, so like there's like the pi r squared and E equal MC squared to the cover up, and the bird bath being like a pi r squared. And E equal MC squared, some unidentified. Wait a minute. That's like a registered. I mean, does that mean it's like a North American Free Trade Act? I mean, it's like a registered document baptism, the Mormon Church in Friendswood, Texas, on Flag Day. Are you kidding me? Is that like a registered? I mean, is that like registration? Verifiable documentations of a baptism? Oh yeah. So like anyway, so like all this stuff like years later, studying like all the alphanumerics and realizing what, when, and where seem to be like the alphanumerics of 6, ultimately some like presidential thing about like what's going on that led to like some like going through like what years later after the fact of like deciding that it'd be the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government Stargate program. In any case, so like it gets all into that, but so like once again, okay, I mean, I think I see all the pi r squared and the E equal MC squared of unidentified, unidentified, wait a minute, is that like a carbon footprint of a baptism? An absentee voting? I mean, is that like a method of banking? Yeah, so like I got baptized, okay? So like, like do you see all the pi r squared and all that? The E equal MC squared of like the cover up and the top secret, yeah. CIA Stargate program, yeah, like Six Flags, yeah, sure it is, yeah. So like anyway, okay. So in any case, so like that information it seemed to be like, you gotta be kidding me, an unidentified flying bird bath baptism, citing annotation, ratifying and codifying law, constitutional law, and a color-coded Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government Stargate program, and the colonel's going to be there too. And like everyone's going to like be in some idea of like, is it a database administration or, teleprompting of like the Ajax language normally associated with like the colonel? I mean, is it like black or white, day or night, or military time? And as a point of origin, is it always going to be like daylight or always night vision or, or is it like I mean, for real, okay? Is it a time zone issue or, you got to be kidding me. So like spherical quadrant of globalization. So like anyway, so like or something like the mind's eye thing about the BMD, yeah, the MBD military barrel deterrent and the mind's eye thing about it. Yeah. So like anyway, so like yeah, okay, so like anyway, I want to say something about the name Paul Walker because it seemed to be somehow in my mind it's like automatically like a star is born or a telepathic star is like airborne, okay. And ultimately it gets to the maritime law, and it seemed to be the thing about the American Idol, and what that is as compared to a wide area network, or is it like liquidal equity of maritime law, or some idea of appreciation, and not necessarily liquidal or null and void, and of no use. I mean, or some idea of like equity is liquidation. Getting to some idea of like a aviation and aeronautics and FCC, seemingly, some idea of making a grade beyond internet protocol of a local area network, and getting more so along into the sky as compared to some, front lines of the beachfront, deciding if importing and exporting is only commerce dictating who or what is on or offshore, or, if like a investment terminology is going to dictate whether human capital is going to define the meaning of that fact of commerce dictating what's on or offshore of SAN software, if it's going to be like securities and annuities network or storage area network or some idea of a news anchor, maybe not even knowing what it means to be like where they're at like this very second, a news anchor. I mean, is that supposed to be like identifying like a international law as like having fair use, or is it like a issue of like a degree level not bound by limitations of anything other than like the total freedom, like any and every degree of controlling like every money or electronic distribution of like what it means. as compared to some geographic attachment that would only place maybe what limitations would only mean based upon an economic factor, or maybe some like, beyond, anything else other than maybe, doing something like really, really spectacular, like, hey, yeah, I really feel like being a superstar, So, like I have all this to say about it because really I put a lot of time into it. But I was wanting to mention like this because of I had mentioned several times before, and, and EA Sports seems to be, I mean, if it's ultimate, getting to the point of like NFL having instant replay in the blink of an eye, or having a multitude of options within the blink of an eye. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the point of don't be fooled by imitations or some idea of, I don't know if that's supposed to be some idea of like geographic attachment as a symbolic linguistic deal of alphanumerics geographically attached, like while I'm not looking, or like while I'm grocery shopping, kind of like, what's going on with professional witnessing, So like in any case, so I mean, so like what's going on with mechanics lane? I mean, is that like I mean, does that involve like a pedestrian, a mechanics lane? I'm looking at some idea of like transportation, and what's been going on. I mean, is it really the thought of a commercial venue of living quarter presenting a mechanics lane as a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate as a deed restriction? Or is it really loss prevention in a way of like maybe a degreed or non-degreed issue, or maybe like having fair use has only been led to believe that being in control of managing factors of like the rightful owners might not even have the academic capability of overcoming a vice president network of like being misled as a pretense as loss prevention. And the only thing about loss prevention really seems to be whether or not it's only being used as some idea of like whether a news anchor knows the difference or not, or some like an appraisal of a resurrecting factor, maybe above the operator or the equator representing some idea beyond a local area network based upon internet protocol. Well, what all that means. But anyway, I was wanting to clarify some of that information only because of the name Paul Volcker being during the Ronald Reagan administration. And yes, the Ronald Reagan, administration seemed to be the thing. And, it seemed to be like, the thing about the information being presented as the name with the initials Paul Volcker being PV and VP is the Vice President Network. Somewhere in my mind, Occupational Safety Health Administration. And I'm going to have to actually think about it. Paul Volcker's name is alphanumerically or analytically, symbolically associated, directly to the thought of like OSHA involving construction of like high-rise buildings, or A Star is Born, or Jesus knew you before the foundations of the earth, and what that is to like, some high-rise skyline, or, some idea of like an altimeter, based upon, architecture and platform. In any case, so like it presents all this information about, Jesus knew before the foundation of the earth, and it's like, after the third day, resurrecting, going to Mount Olives, and then ascending into the sky, re-entering heaven, and like the second coming, the rapture, coming back from heaven and like meeting in the sky, and all the stuff about Abraham Lincoln night vision, shadow government Stargate program, and it seems to be, so much about, the memory minds de facto. It's like, unreal. So like, anyway, I just want to include that about the book, because there's like other information, and I get the perception, I catch it out of the corner of my eye. If there's any gestures involving, anything that would represent some idea like a gastroenterology or something like, wedlock, like banning, or some like, smudged with, hieroglyphics, somewhere in gastroenterology, okay? In any case, okay? Or, the Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi thing about, hey, that's an awesome bubblicious portfolio, okay? But are you dyslexic? Okay. So, like, anyway, okay, the Obi-Wan sounds light in your life, okay? So, like, in any case, okay? And anyway, so, like, I want to say that about Paul Volcker, because, I'm going to have to think about it, if Paul Walker's name is somehow alphanumerically connected to the biblical scripture, Jesus said he knew before the foundation of the earth, and OSHA, and ocean, and what, the evolution of fossil fuel is to, like, caviar or a black dot on a map. And think about, all that stuff about the Prince of Wales, yeah. The Prince of Wales, yeah. But anyway, I want to include that because I'm going to think about it. If Paul Walker is associated with, like, Occupational Safety Health Administration and that N, and OSHA being ocean, and think about the Spore Stone and, like, the forecast, or orthopedic surgery and the Spore Stone and the United States constitutional amendments and the word and terminology on world news and national news of, at the time, it seemed to be the deal about distinguish the difference between oh God, yeah, the Spore Stone and the information that was being provided between, like, OSHA and ocean, and to think about surfing the internet and terminology, going beyond the thought of maritime law with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and the N, why the N is like one cycle, and pronunciation in Spanish, measure 1 cycle per second, and oscillation, like that one half above and half below, of like 1 cycle in frequency and oscillation over the N in Spanish, applied to OSHA and being the ocean, and some idea of evolution, and the electronic schematic fish of, like, symbolic representation of, like, absolute Christianity, and the affirmative fallopian tube as compared to the Mississippi, or the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi and HTTP : double forward slash as compared to, the HTTP, ratio : double forward slash. The colon the ratio issue that way. But I wanted to include that because it seemed to be, the idea that somewhere in between, like, Marcus Welby and, Quincy. Okay, here's the deal about the electricians union on Covern by Hobby Airport on Telephone Road. Excuse me. Is that telephone's like 100, okay? The 100 Club, or, the thought of, like, Vantage Love 30, or Secret De Facto 30, and 30 being THIRTY, and 100, Vantage Love 100, Secret De Facto 100. The thing about that International Electronic Engineering Electrician's Apprenticeship on Covern, World News was presenting the information of covert missions. And the difference between, Covern and covert is like the difference between T and N being a difference of 6. I mean, so ultimately getting to the point of somewhere between Marcus Welby and Quincy is presenting, the human factor of a medical power of attorney using fiction and real estate as a deed restriction. Yet Quincy is the medical examiner, and sequencing, okay, is the thing about the architecture and platform of a medical examiner. The high-O silver, what would be normally identified as a toilet in sanitation, the difference between Marcus Welby and like Quincy is like the sequencing involving quantum and attenuation, okay, and the color codes between, like, Miami and, like, Los Angeles, like the Miami Dolphins in color code one way is like another color code of geographics, yet combined, with, like, UCLA and McDonald's Golden Arches, and even, like Notre Dame, the colors that was like golden green, golden blue, and golden purple, and all that connectivity with, like, the Israeli flag and the Israeli bird being one bird and 2 colors being blue and purple, okay, and Notre Dame that way of, like, the gold in 3 different colors. It's almost like Univision using the one black and 3 pastels in the beginning, and then the 3 pastels in a white. In principle, I mean, in practical application, it's like Notre Dame presenting the gold with the 3 different colors. Yet it's presenting, the difference between gold going up and down, like the difference between day and night. I mean, for real, like Abraham Lincoln, night vision, shadow government Stargate program of, like, Notre Dame and Univision in principle that way, even like RPM on Highway 288 and Pro Bass in Bass Pro, presenting, like why one pronoun with 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject. I mean, it's almost like RPM presenting, the 3 black vinyls of like Motown being, the RPMs of the 33, 45, and 78. And why the one pronoun, it's almost like Pro Bass on Highway 288. I mean, like right on South Beltway 8, Sam Houston Tollway. I mean, it's like the difference between day and night in the biggest mouth of the river, being in Mississippi, and, the schematic triangle representing, the Delta Force. Well, in any case, so like, that's on like Highway 288. And, all that information has been going on, ultimately, somewhere in my mind of like OPEC and, ERP, Wyatt Earp. And it's like the difference between day and night, and ERP being exclusionary rule provision of the acronym, yet the name, exclusionary rule, the exclusionary rule provision, the alphanumerics are 39, like OPEC. Chase being, like 36 in oil. And 36 in God, what is it? God. It's like the difference of 3. 36 and 3 is like 39. Okay, but anyway, so like, it's almost like the 56 is in a paper mat, and 3 being alphanumerically 56, and ultimately annotating adoption and abortion, and the Roe v. Wade, and the difference between like daylight and dark, and even the Lexus LFSA and Mercedes-Benz Smart for 2 smart car, including the Lexus LFSA of color code. Seemingly now it's automatically like a Geneva, Switzerland being venue of Univision. Think about the 2015 Geneva Summit meeting, that one particular car, and the interior color of it being black and white. Even the colors of like the space shuttle, the colors of a Holy Seagull, and Holy Seagull spelled with 2 L's is like 137, like Washington, D.C. and like Clear Lake, Texas, okay, where Lyndon B. Johnson, Space Center is, okay. There seemed to be a deal about Lyndon B. Johnson going through, the idea of like a Richard Nixon, and I'll have to actually think about some information involving energy and the Roosevelt New Deal Act between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, and what that is between, somewhere in my mind between like William Jefferson Clinton. It seemed to be, excuse me, at the end of like William Jefferson Clinton term in office, and George W. Bush taking over. It seemed to be like a transition of like, the additives, preservatives, and byproducts that were normally on, edible foods, of FDA approved. Okay. And the thing of it is that, that's like 65, really. F being like 6, the difference between like ABC 13 Houston to ABC 7 Los Angeles is like, the F. And the D and A is like 5. It's like 6 and 5 and 65. Of like, the Social Security Administration number of, 12 and 13, 1-800-772, 12 and 13 being like L&M and legal media, and ultimately get into, L12 and, M13 being ultimately, like a, 64 and 65 combined with the COVID ID 19 thing being ultimately 83 and 84. And, all this connectivity and studying it, and even biblical prophecy, like the 3rd and 4th generation, somewhere in my mind, like from A to Z is like a generation, from like 1 to 26, then 27 to like 52, then 53 to 78, 79 to 104. It's almost like alphanumerically in chronological, like, the 3rd and 4th generation being of like the alphanumerics of Z, 78, and like Z, 104. So like it seemed to be like, something almost biblical that way of alphanumeric in a chronological double / progressive productive way, not necessarily, if it's an issue of like appreciation or depreciation, as compared to what seemed to be the issue of like neighborhoods of like residential as compared to commercial venue living quarter or television programming. But anyway, yeah, so like I'm going off into it. I just want to include that information because I'm gonna have to keep it in mind about Paul Volcker's name if it's directed. I'm just not really thinking about it and getting serious about maybe thinking about if Paul Volcker, the name for the New York Federal Reserve Bank president during the Ronald Reagan administration, in the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. Going to Washington, D.C. Of Ronald Reagan's request to get the economics, back into proper perspective, okay? Like a Secretary of Treasury, Robert E. Rubin, once again, including, that fact about, it seemed to be ultimately, the one and only United States Secretary of Treasury, and combined with that particular book, Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, how Paul Volcker, as the president of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, represents, the U.S. dollar at an automatic, international worldwide level, it being like New York, okay? The thing with this is that, it being that way of some idea like the U.S. dollar. And, Robert E. Rubin is likewise, like General Motors, like de facto, yet a transaction at the bank presenting some idea of securities and annuities of international law, not normally even identified as intellectual property, of having fair use and managing the fact of loss prevention, maybe more so of maybe like an appraisal, of what it means to be someone else's idea, like what it means in wealth, what a person seems to be worth in other people's viewpoint and eyes that way, yeah. So in any case, it seemed to be some of that information presents it in that way, but Robert E. Rubin, the United States Secretary of Treasury, he presents all the names beyond what would be maybe the U.S. dollar as history, a retroactive intellectual based upon a current event or a current affair, or some idea a retroactive presidential administration as a current event or a current affair, and with the name of a transaction of an endorsement or signature on front as authorized, as compared to the backside. If the whole idea that an authorized signature is from face value, presenting some idea of MP3 format, or some color code of chromium oxide that would be the magnetic strip of audio, and some even video of some of the older video tape, yeah. But the magnetic strip, on cards, credit cards, debit cards, and not limited to, but it seemed to be the predominant color is somewhere in between a chromium, oxide, the brownish colored, stuff about the magnetic strip, retaining information of magnetic impression, yeah. But anyway, yeah, so I'm going to include that because it seemed to be the deal about, COVID-19 and, brown being the issue of the chromium oxide in my mind of the identifying factors of debit cards, or, what kind of card it is, if it's credit or annuity, a prepaid card, or a gift card, what the case really is, or something all expense paid, corporate, having a right to a similar all expense paid card, in any case, so I want to include that because it seems that Robert E. Rubin presents, the freedom of annuity if the de facto, whether or not, if the whole entire point of television programming is knowing or not knowing, if somewhere in between Marcus Welby and Quincy, there's the conversion from analog to digital, with just those two programs, presenting, the idea of whether or not if a mechanics lane is only the idea of, progression, or what an easement such as driveway is, or transportation. Marcus Welby to Quincy, it's the high-o silver, yet the oldest governmental computer mainframe, and not limited to, and really not that at all. It's just that Quincy, okay, I went to an electrician's union to take a test, okay, as an apprentice, just to do it. For real, just to do it. But when I, the two times that I went at that particular location, on Covern, right by Hobby Airport on Telephone Road. I mean, the test was like, I mean, so far beyond even 4-year, journeyman. I was sitting there in that classroom looking at that test. I mean, I couldn't even fake. I mean, I'd already put my name on it. And I didn't, I mean, that's as far as I went. I mean, I wasn't even going to attempt anything. I wasn't even going to attempt erasing my name, looking like it was a mistake. So, like, I didn't answer it to maybe look like that. What that part about me not even attempting to, like, answer, like, any of those, like, equations involving, that depth of, like, sequencing. I mean, there's obviously some idea of, like, quantum and some other issues, and which is, like, another reason why on that symbolic representation in between the C and the PTIS, it seemed to be the field, scope, and range of law on the halo left side of that symbolic representation, yet a telepathic mediation in the sky of the spirit of adoption, yet geographically some like news anchor in like Galveston County, now from X213, and Shirley Silverado, Z71, and telepathic brainwaves, Z71 in Pearland, there's like geographics involved with, like the arm not being put in Galveston County, because it would like be Galveston country and it wouldn't equate to 213, or all the spiritually gifted stuff, and the R put in the Brazoria County being Brazoria country, and so, like spiritually motivation, like idea like a telepathic, birth in the sky thing, some telepathic, mediation in the sky thing about it, and biblical scripture of Alpha Mary 206, and, that's the way I see the Chevrolet Silverado Z71 in Pearland being Brazoria country, as a biblical scripture and a symbolic representation on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill that way. But anyway, like that symbolic representation is like the 3 simplest methods of computation, equating to 58. Okay, and then it ultimately gets beyond that, and the one line that would normally be vertical, automatically it was like a horizontal, like a EE thing, and automatically it was almost like a Texas Instruments calculator involving calculus. That whether if it's an error or beyond the software engineering of calculus, the EE would pop up anyway, whether it's an error or not, or beyond, the intended use of a calculator, as far as programmed, limitation, the way it's designed. I mean, the EE is like a Texas Instrument thing, and automatically in my mind it seemed to be that EE would be like where that would be. Yet Texas Instrument, it's almost like it presents, in my mind, Sarbanes and Oxley, financial instruments of SOX compliance, almost like that EE, in the way of what SOX compliance is, somewhere between, the Chicago White Sox and the Boston Red Sox, to the major cities of, two individual, major cities of the, each of the 12 Federal Reserve Banks, one in Chicago, one in Boston, and all the color codes involving, the fact about it. But anyway, so like I want to include that because somewhere between like, Marcus Welby and Quincy, I mean, there's the idea of attenuation and sequencing. And in my mind, like now, it's like the difference between like Marcus Welby and Quincy is sequencing of that like apprenticeship, international electronic engineering test, far beyond any apprenticeship or even a journeyman. I guarantee I looked at it. I mean, I couldn't even fake it. I mean, it was like unreal sequencing. And I'm just now realizing that and mentioning something about Quincy and sequencing and the high-O silver thing about, what the high-O silver is and structure of storage area networks or governmental, deals about, the high-O silver and, ultimately international financial management and international banking systems of Commonwealth, going beyond the outhouse and the manure side and the high-O silver thing, get a little, grander about the grander tenure, I know you mean well, and get well soon, yeah, like really, get well soon, yeah, sure, yeah, go beyond being baptized there in the gold rush and being on the like Wells Fargo stagecoach, yeah. So like any case, so like I was like including all that because it seemed to be that Marcus Welby and like Quincy, it seemed to be the deal about why I've waited for so very many years about that one deal and the vertical line being somewhere in my mind, like the 90-degree, what would be English, yet a 90-degree, what would be Japanese, read from top to bottom. And it seemed to be, something while I was looking for quantum, was the two Japanese letter of the 22, and it seemed to be, automatically, I knew that was my first thought. Hey, that looks like Japanese. Of the actual structures in quantum. And I'm thinking very well, maybe. And the thing with it is that that's why I have kind of like just completely put a stop on it. The one vertical line. I haven't gone beyond 59 with just what would be a 90 degree, looking like a vertical line or one from 58 to 59, or Highway 59, one of the oldest national landmarks in the United States, and Highway 59 being like, the thing about, South America's 140 in Pearland, Texas. In any case, so like the one line, it seemed to be, deal about the field, scope, and range of law, and it seemed to be that halo left side of the symbolic representation on the back side of the U.S. $1 between the C and the PTIS. It would look like an on-site, like scope. That one line being vertical is automatically in my mind quantum, and I completely just put a complete, stopping weight kind of like thing for something about that. But, I really hadn't went past 59 or just the alphanumeric value because of an isometric factor of maybe being naive and blind to a 90 degree and realizing something vertical, reading top to bottom, being Japanese that way. And it seemed to be the only two Japanese letters at the time I was looking at structure, because the different design E is in calculus, but the structure is not. The different design E in calculus is in quantum, likewise, and in addition, the structure of quantum is completely different than any structure like formative computation in its structure, the way it's just like structured. It's obvious as it gets. That's why I waited on that one deal about quantum, because if I do it, it's going to be something about quantum, not just simple addition and subtraction or analytical or symbolic. And so I have any comprehensible sense about any kind of computation that way of it. But anyway, I've waited very long about that one part about it. But it seemed to be the deal somehow in my mind between like Marcus Welby and Quincy, ultimately even an electrician's apprenticeship, on a test of the electricians union, and that one particular test involving sequencing. I'm sitting in that class looking at the test, thinking like, what is this even in this, classroom for? That's something even, journeyman would probably be like almost perplexed, like what is going on for real, And so the sequencing was like something that was like an automatic perception of like, I'm not even going to even try and fake it. So I just sit there, like I said, every single time, I just sit there and wait until it was time to leave. So, I wasn't even going to guess it, not at that one particular test, not at all. So that's what I did twice, okay? But at the time, World News was presenting covert mission, and it seemed to be about the memory and realizing, hey, all that information all around was on television around, and inside, outside, when and where, who, what, when, and all that. And I was realizing some connectivity that way, and that's one that I'm referring to right now. And a difference of 6. And continually it seemed to be, some seriously not funny stuff about the alphanumeric 6 in that way. But so it seemed to be the deal about, sequencing in quantum that way of the high-O silver in one way, yet in another. But anyway, it's already going on 53 minutes and 47 seconds. I'm already needing to take a break, but I want to include that because all that information of the signatures and the hospitals all across the country, not limited to, and I don't know who keeps doing it, okay, but I'd refer to Nimitz class, okay, and I mentioned several books, okay, that I focus on, and it seemed to be in coordination with monetary domestic gross national products and big shipments of importing and exporting and movements of a lot of money, and Securities Exchange Commission, or what the deal is in between commercial paper is identified, and what the bubble is, and the New York Stock Exchange and on the floor as some idea as a trend. Sometimes a bubble is referred to. It's almost like it's not considered. To me, every day it seems to be only an issue of networking, or whether or not it's a degreed or non-degreed issue. Inside trading information. they refer to it as like it's frowned upon. But I mean, like every single day, that's all that happens. I mean, on the floor at New York Stock Exchange. I mean, if they're like not trading it, then how are they like knowing what to do? Like really? But in one sense, it's not that it's monopolizing capitalization. Yet they're not identifying any inside trading information as monopolizing capitalization as some idea of, well, I guess it only involves like barometric altimeters of condensing residuals only of like neighborhoods. I mean, it's like they're not identifying like inside trading information as, some idea of infringement upon, intellectual property, or the thought of like some idea of like a yeah, I'm losing my train of thought here real quick, but anyway, it goes on and on about knowing the difference between degree terminology or what an acronym is and is not in circuit. I mean, it's kind of like a whole new perception of like everything. Even that chapter, Winners and Losers, in the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Third Observer Runs the Country. I mean, when it's applied to the McDonald's Golden Arches, a degree level representatives and considerable participation, and like the delta force and pi squared of a 6-point star, and just that one cycle half above and below, being practical application of principle being side by side, like McDonald's Golden Arches being the half cycle above, half cycle below, becoming side by side like an electronic schematic fish, or some idea of some affirmative fallopian tube in a big mouth of Mississippi, and the misappropriation and allocation of the Mississippi reflect that word relation, and some idea of ratio between HTTP colon being a ratio of double forward slash between the misappropriation and allocation of Mississippi and the international superstar and supplemental security income. In any case, so like I'm already like it's already going on like 57 minutes, but I want to include that information because it seemed to be that somewhere between Quincy and Marcus Welby and Quincy, it's distinguish the difference between the conversion between like analog to digital, and the pastel being some idea of like an easement of access of like Technicolor, and the pastel colors and the idea of conversion. So like anyway, I'm going to need to take a break anyway. So it's already gone on like 57 minutes and like 39 seconds, and there that much is about. Okay, there it is. Okay.